Well, welcome everyone. My name is Amanda Johnston, and I am the founder and executive director of Torch Literary Arts. Thank you for joining us today for In Conversation with Remica Bingham-Risher, Trapeta Mayson, and Lisa Cain to celebrate Risher's latest collection, Room Swept Home. Tonight's program will begin with a reading by Trapeta Mayson, followed by Remica Bingham-Risher, and then we'll welcome Lisa Cain for a special conversation moderated by Trapeta. Please enter your questions through the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We will ask a few questions as time permits at the end. I also want to give a special thanks to those who purchased a copy of Room Swept Home through Torch's bookshop page. We will mail you a signed book plate with proof of purchase. We'll share a link in the chat and a QR code at the end to place your order if you haven't already. If you have already purchased your copy, again, thank you, but also buy another copy for a friend. A little about Torch Literary Arts. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization established to publish and promote creative writing by Black women. We publish contemporary writing by experienced and emerging writers alike in our digital publication, Torch Magazine, and our programs include the Wildfire Reading Series, workshops, an annual retreat, and special events like our conversation tonight. This program is made possible in part with support from the Austin Cultural Arts Division, the Burdine Johnson Foundation, the Poetry Foundation, the Austin Community Foundation Black Fund, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And now I am honored to introduce tonight's features. I will read their bios before we begin the reading and the conversation. A native of Liberia who grew up in Philadelphia, Trapeta B. Mayson was the 2020 and 2021 Philadelphia Poet Laureate and is the founder of the Healing Verse poetry line. She is a recipient of an Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship. Mayson is also a Pew and Cave Canem Fellow and Leeway Transformation Awardee, among others. A widely published poet, educator, teaching artist, and licensed clinical social worker, Mayson is a member of several organizations where she uses the arts to mobilize, build community, and help create change. Lisa D. Cain, PhD, is a self-taught artist and memory painter. Her predominant painting style, traditional folk art acrylic paint on canvas, provides a pictorial history of life in the rural South and in Canton, Mississippi. The vividly colored traditional acrylic folk art paintings depict the joy of growing up in her hometown community. These paintings contain figures of individuals involved in everyday activities reminiscent of traditional folk artists, including Bernice Sims, Clementine Hunter, and Grandma Moses. Remica Bingham-Risher is a native of Phoenix, Arizona, is a Cave Canem Fellow and Affrilachian Poet. Her work has been published in the New York Times, the Writer's Chronicle, Callaloo, and Essence. She is the author of Conversions, winner of the Naomi Long Madgett Poetry Award, What We Ask of Flesh, Starlight and Error, and her latest collection, Room Swept Home. Her memoir, Soul Culture, Black Poets, Books, and Questions That Grew Me Up, was published by Beacon Press. She is the Director of Quality Enhancement Plan Initiatives at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, where she resides with her husband and children. Up first, please welcome Trapeta Mayson.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda, in the Torch Literary Arts series. I am so honored to be here this evening, particularly to share this virtual stage with Remica and with Lisa. And I am going to share a piece from Room Swept Home. You're going to hear a lot about my feelings about this just beautiful book and the questions that I'm going to have for Lisa and Remica, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation. So I am going to read first a poem from the collection Room Swept Home. The tenderness of one woman for another. There was little play when I was a child. I shared secrets with no one. Had to dress up clothes, had no dress up clothes or bows. I missed other little girls then. My daughters were my dolls. spitting up and weary of sleep. I was so grateful when the women came, took the crying babies from my arms, took my wash, scrubbed my kitchen to sparkling. I could barely lift my head, I was so tired, but they laid their hands on me. We, our own assembly, passing victuals, counting heads and nickels, bragging on children, come by birth or fortune, loving folks' dirt, harboring it along with life, slapping our thighs when the telling gets good. We are happy to grow old together, to cross the changing streets, and to be near each other, though our floorboards have worn thin. They sat watch with me when Thomas was dying, after, though the sun was going, and they had worn their good shoes, stooped down in the dirt behind the house to weed and clear the garden. In my final years, changed my bedclothes, brought willow bark and ginger, said a soft prayer, tied the healing string in knots until the moaning stopped, then took a comb to my hair. What a beautiful poem. Thank you, Remica. Thank you. And I'm sharing this poem because there's the three of us having this conversation this evening, and this is the tenderness of one woman for another. And then I'm going to share one of my own pieces that's just a reflection on, it's called Homecoming for the People of the Sun. And this is after John Dowell's, he has a series of paintings called Cotton. And there's one of them, a series called Cotton, about cotton and in the South. And there's one of the paintings that he has called Sometimes They Would Not Bury Us. And this poem is inspired by that painting. When they would not bury us, we held our homegoings, and in our leaving, we were still luminous. We were holy and spirited, bones and flesh, sweat and sacrifice. Artfully handled till we resembled ourselves, venerated and gilded in Sunday best, going to meet our maker with flair, reposed and encased in our new home, among our watch night folks keeping wake. They were a weeping and a mourning through the night, then at daybreak our own laid us to rest. They were a weeping and a mourning through the day, and singing and clapping our earthly selves away. And even when they would not bury us, we had our homegoings, our people digging with shovels and pickaxes and love, deep into the earth's grooves, down past the sod, parting the soil to tunnel under the dirt of this land to carry us home. Don't need your 6 feet under hypocrisy to tell us we are human. Got our big mamas humming us a sweet tune to carry us on over to promised lands. Don't need your lopsided trinity, the Father and the Son, but no Black spirit. We know we consecrated. We know we're light. See us floating like cotton above your burial grounds. See us rising like cotton above your sin and broken commandment. We are the people of the sun. We go home too. And in our homegoing, there are chariots and pomp and grandeur and majesty sending us on to glory. Thank you.
And now, please welcome
my pleasure.
Author of Room Swept Home, Remica L. Bingham-Risher.
Oh man, I appreciate y'all. Trapeta, that is not fair that I have to go after you have made me all teary and misty. Hearing that poem, that reminds me that sometimes the folks that, ushered all of us in had to make their own traditions and their own care and have their own agency to form their own means of living, right? Because people, even in death, tried to remind them that they weren't worthy of pomp right? Thank you both, really. This is one of the conversations that I dreamed up because I wanted to make sure that we got to talk to Lisa about this beautiful, beautiful cover art. And it does not happen without Amanda Johnston and Torch. So I thank you so much for inviting us. So Room Swept Home has been in the world for a week and a day. So it just came out last week. And it's a book about my grandmothers. And so I'm going to read a few poems and set you up so you understand why, for me, it was imperative to write their stories. My third great grandmother, Minnie Fawkes, was born enslaved in 1859 and was interviewed for the WPA slave narrative. She lived her whole life in Petersburg, Virginia, in Chesterfield County. And if that wasn't miraculous enough, because she has such an interesting story, her narrative is one of the longest narratives. She was interviewed by a Black woman in Petersburg, so she was super candid in a way that many of those narratives are not. So I was thinking about her and then realized that my maternal grandmother, Mary Knight, was within 1 mile of Minnie in Petersburg, Virginia in 1941, and they would have had no idea about this, really. She was in Petersburg because she gave birth to her first child at 18, was suffering with postpartum, which they thought of as kind of water on the brain. It was an ongoing mystery then, and she was sent to the Central Lunatic Asylum for the Negro Insane, which was in Petersburg in 41. And so as a poet, this was too much for me to take. So I set out to write their stories and imagine those, intersections, and then think about what all of these kinds of reckonings mean for us here, where we are now. I learned a lot while I was writing this book. The book is poems, historical photographs, family photos, and lots of research. And so I'm going to start with a poem that is in Minnie's voice, because thinking about hearing Trapeta talk about that beautiful cotton series, I thought that I was researching my grandmother and she would talk throughout her narrative about how they worked cotton in Virginia, we in the South. And that was not the case. Most of those enslaved at that time worked tobacco. And many of them, the enslaved folks, were walked daily to tobacco factories, worked in the factory, then walked back to their plantation homes, and then continued to work in tobacco for the remainder of their lives. And so this is a poem called Strip Tobacco Like Greens, which is in Minnie's hands. And you really do. If you ever worked with collard greens, you got to strip them down, and same thing with tobacco. Strip tobacco like greens. Ain't much difference. Soak them in water to ease the leaves. Then pull the largest ones to wrap the bundle. These called the hands. We, the stemmers. All women on the line, rows filled with traveling songs. I sang as a child at the feet of my mother. She bound the leaves packed in hogsheads. Some found bodies in the large drums, put there for punishment or fun. During the war, the factory was a hospital. All the wounded gathered like cutlery, for a time cared for, shined. Work moved outdoors, never stopped. In the years after, we get nary $1 a day, pennies enough for those notes thrown wild into the field, low and worn, the singing from children's dancing mouths, those hands like ours, vein heavy, softened, worked over, sweet aroma unto heaven, little more than ash and plenty to men. Our mothers, upended, invented, inventors. Our fathers, a secret, or kept under the tally, thread woven through throat, groin, and spine. Bitter stem, bitter greens, yellow leaves, little soothes the busy hand, the flying mind. So it's interesting to think about the work that we did, the way that we were able to, I hope you can see some of these images from the book. It's women in 1901 working in a tobacco factory. And the fact that these women, like Trapeta brought out in that first poem, really carried each other throughout the whole of their lives. So I'm gonna jump around a little bit and read a poem from my other grandmother, from Mary, who was sent to the asylum, and then maybe come back and read two poems that I think about as being for the both of them. Yeah. So I'm going to read Mary taken to the Central Lunatic Asylum, which kind of recounts the events of those days, which are actually still in the records of Central Lunatic Asylum, which is now Central State Hospital. We waited 75 years so we could get the records and write the stories. Mary taken to the Central Lunatic Asylum. She will jump, she says. She no longer cares for the child after the fire of the mind has taken her clothes and shoes, her pious tongue, and thrown them into the street. The suffering grows in her, settles in her belly like snuff, and nothing comes as it should. Not a groan or holler, not the doctor on time, just the child mangling everything. And after, no blood. 2 stories up, she warns everyone. The power and the spirit are coming. And when she gets a hold of the underside of her husband's skin, taking it with her over the steep ledge with her newborn screaming in the distance between them, the siren choir approaching with its fire and wings, her husband is dumbstruck when they ask if she is herself, while she curses him, swearing in a rage, the words coming like spirit, her fists moving as fast as the mind, and everyone at arm's length bloodied and weary until she is handcuffed and sped away. God willing, she says to her husband, and something indecipherable as he signs the large green ledger, finally reverent, admitting the God who led him here, who transfigured and loosed another, not unlike herself, a body outside her body, coming in another name. So, we are writing through some of the most extraordinary and difficult events in people's lives, and it was kind of imperative for me to also write through some of their joy and to also build some of that joy into the artwork that's on the cover. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, Lisa and I. But I want to read two more poems that put Minnie and Mary in conversation. They never met in real life, but I looked at the parallels that happened in their lives and was grateful for some of them. One of them, and the title of the poem, is that both Minnie and Mary lived to 84. It's a contrapuntal, so I'll read Minnie's side, then Mary's side, and I'll read them together. Minnie. Born slave, my heart gave out, failed and betrayed me. Too big, maybe, delivered what little love kept me alive. Dark and wondrous, my hands are skillful. A slave again, even in my people's eyes when they ask all those questions. I run to the fishing hole, sing in the light. I believe the past is one teacher, not the whole spirit. And this is Mary. Born free, my kidneys won't filter out what they need. The world had the soft carapace of the body, steady as steel, until I become a bent flower, heavy stone. But son, a new day comes over and over. Worry won't have me. I work the garden, pray in the dark. the body withers, not the whole mind. Now, this is Minnie and Mary together. Born slave, born free, my heart gave out. My kidneys failed and betrayed me, won't filter out. Too big, maybe, delivered what they need. What little love the world had kept me alive. The soft carapace of the body, dark and wondrous, steady as steel. My hands are skillful until I become a slave again, a bent flower, heavy stone, even in my people's eyes. But son, a new day comes when they ask over and over all those questions. Worry won't have me. I run to the fishing hole. I work the garden, sing in the light, pray in the dark. I believe the past is one teacher. The body withers, not the whole spirit, not the whole mind. Thank y'all. Let's talk a little bit. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Remica, thank you so much for that beautiful reading. I feel the ancestors present fully. They are here amongst us and shining down on you in this brilliant work. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now I want to welcome visual artist and cover artist of Room Swept Home, Lisa Cain, to join Remica and Trapeta in conversation. Turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I want to echo this and say that this is such a pleasure. What a beautiful reading. Remica, I've been living with this book since we met up in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Of all places.
I know.
And Lisa, I've lived with your art. I have 2 of your pieces on my wall now for a couple of years.
Yes.
So it's only fitting that we are in this trio of sisters and womanhood, and that we're going to have this conversation. Remica, thank you for this beautiful book. Just thank you for the work and the words. It is so appreciated. So there's an arresting line that I love in the very first poem. Dear editor, I want to find my people.
Yeah.
I've been repeating that line as I read through Miss Mary and Miss Minnie's story. I was finding your people, right? And as I'm familiar with Lisa's art and her stories and your story, Lisa, both of you, Lisa, you were inspired by your grandmother. Remica's writing about great-great-great-grandmother and grandmother.
Yeah.
And just talk to us. I want to ask a question about the people and finding our folks. Remica, do you feel through the stories, and it's so hard because poets can never fully get to this, that you have found them, that you have done justice to these women's stories? And then I wanted to segue to Lisa to ask, do you feel that in reading through Remica's story, that your artwork, just talk about how you're able to help find her people through your art? But we'll start with Remica. Do you feel a satisfaction with this?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Is it a satisfaction, meaning the work is done? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But this work, it is the work of my dreams. I mean, it opens with an epigraph from Minnie that she actually said in her interview. If I know how to write and I had a little learning, I could put off a book on this here situation.
Yes.
Who could have imagined this would be where we were?
Yes.
Not even 100 years after she gave that interview. So yes, I'm grateful that I have been, given the opportunity to illuminate their voices. Are we done illuminating voices of people who should have been heard? Absolutely not. So we'll continue to do that. That will be part of my charge as a poet, and as a mother, and now as a grandmother and a human being for the rest of my life. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Singing,
So
singing
then
Odeo.
I want to talk about this connection with you and Lisa, because there's one thing to put these stories out deeply personal. You're talking about what is now called postpartum depression, and you're talking about the experiences of tobacco, slavery, and all these things. And then you're entrusting a visual artist to interpret this through the cover art that is that front-facing part of the book. So,
Yeah.
Lisa, how did y'all come to know one another? And how did you feel about the finding my people? How were you able to represent that through the art?
First, I want to say I am so honored to be among brilliant women, creative women. And I really admire both you, Trapeta, and Remica. And Amanda, thank you for providing this platform. Remica had a line in her book that says, the poet's job is to make the dead become living.
Mm.
And we share that connection. She is a poet, and myself as an artist.
Mhm.
In my art, I try to tell the story of the people that I grew up with,
Yeah.
whose voices may not be heard, or
Yeah.
whose faces you may not see. And so I was so honored, and I'm still so honored to be a part of such a brilliant piece of work. I'm tickled pink. I'm honored. And so when I was first contacted about this, I said, interesting. And I remember in my first attempt, I put something on canvas, but it was not until I talked to Remica,
That's right.
and I can only paint what I feel.
Mm.
And when I talked to Remica, I began to feel her spirit, the joy that she had for her grandparents.
Mm.
She told me about her grandparents, Mary and Minnie, and I began to feel their spirit. And from feeling and from incorporating her joy, her pride, her respect for her grandparents, I was able to then deliver a product that I thought was representative of what she wanted to say, and what was representative of what she felt. And so it was all through a connection of feelings between two individuals who
Yes.
shared a common experience, my love for my grandmother and her love for her grandmothers.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
and you picked that comes. Go ahead, Remica, because you can
I
feel
just
that.
wanted to say what Lisa's leaving out, because she's so modest, is that not only did we have a conversation, but she said, tell me who Minnie and Mary are. I need to see their poems. Can you send me the work? Can you show me? So, I mean, she did a deep dive in a very short amount of time. And in addition to us just finding that we had so many things in common. But really, I mean, this is one, brilliant artist kind of putting in the work to find connection here. Yeah, and her cover art is
Yes.
up there for you.
And Remica, was there a particular poem or poems that resonated with this artwork for you? Or part of your family stories that you can
Yeah,
see? 'Cause I know later we'll see more of Lisa's work, which
yeah.
is just beautiful. But are there poems that really tie into this image that's on the cover?
Yeah, Lisa, the full story is that uh I had been stalking Lisa on Instagram for years. Right? Trapeta knows famous people, so she already has art hanging in her house. Right? So I I was just watching artists that I dreamt about working with. I knew that I was looking at people who were doing historical collage. And Lisa was kind of one of the best. I was just arrested by her images. So I sent the press to say, please, can we use a little piece of another painting on the cover of the book? And Lisa said, well, we could do that once we spoke. She said, but those people those aren't the people that you would choose. Why don't we find the historical figures together? Why don't we build their life on the canvas? So it's more than one poem. It's really the whole book. Both of them were fisher women. They really loved being on the water, and that's kind of where the book ends. So you see the pond that's there with the boat in the back. That was Lisa. The room swept home imagery with the broom. We've got a secret broom hidden in there. Both of them were gardening women. So she put a garden of collard greens, and we found a historical figure that had collards coming out of the garden, like she had just picked collards, and the little girl reading to her grandmothers. So, I mean, it's just over and over and over. And not only that, the color schemes as well, because I knew
Yes.
we were doing images that were black and white images that were going to be very muted on the page. So the color, it had to pop. It had to be end in joy in the same way that the book does.
Yes. And as Remica stated, it was so important for me to find the right people
Yes.
to really represent the individuals that she
Yeah.
wanted to depict. So I needed a strong woman to represent Mary.
Yeah.
I needed someone who was more lighthearted to represent Minnie and,
Yeah.
and her love for gardening.
Yeah.
And I needed a figure to represent Remica. And so the girl with the book is Remica. It's like her in the past and and also in the present and in the future. And so it was so important to pick the exact people to give the right message and the colors. I mean, if you look at the orange of the sky, it represents deep feelings. But I must say the blue was Remica's idea. That was her creativity.
Uh-oh, y'all, Lisa let me be a painter through the
Yes.
phone. She
Yes.
was actually making this canvas as we spoke and was sending me pictures like, should we, is this what you like? Should we add something? And I said, oh, can we somehow just have a call out to the water in the sky? I want to see the sky clearing. And look at that beautiful blue. So now I think I can, weigh in on paintings too. No, I don't, y'all.
We need to give you a
No,
I
canvas,
don't have that
Remica.
skill. But
but
Lisa
there's
has it.
story. Yes, there's a story. I see what you mean when you're saying it's the whole, all the poems are really resonating with
That's
this
right.
cover art because I can see and we're following the story. And one of the things that you do in the book, Remica, you use so many different techniques. That you have the photos, you have all types of, like, I call them delightful surprises happening.
Yeah.
And you use a naming technique in some of your poems, definitely in Lost Friends. But there's a long title poem. I'll just say the couple of lines. Victims killed in 1922 were burned at the stake. You have a line that is just, you said, a girl child will be given many names, beloved of the sea, mother, grandmother, patient, obscene, domestic, newly gone, wildfire, burden, stripped clean.
Yeah.
I want you to talk to us about naming. Why is it important? I mean, even in Lisa with her artwork, I kind of was into some of the names of her evening service, rapture, fishing at the creek, all these things. Talk to us about, because that your language plays out throughout this room swept poem. And talk to us about the importance. You were working to get Miss Minnie and Mary's voice and your own experiences, but then that technique of the naming, of finding these names and ways of blending them into the poetry. How did you come about that?
That's a fantastic question. I really appreciate your like eagle eye, Trapeta, and your ear. Also, unless she's changed it to think about naming, Lisa named this painting Generational Wealth, which I thought
Wow.
was like just really tremendous. So know that that's the name of the painting. But for me, naming has always been something that I've been particularly interested in. Not only because, even in my book of essays, I write about my name, my daughter's name. We can never find our name on a mug. So we become people that are fascinated with names, right? These Black girl names. But in addition, I think as a reader, the way things are named are always fascinating to me. And so in that poem in particular, where the victim's poem that really is about an article that was written in 2022 about a couple that found all of these lynching photos in with their grandparents' work. And that was 2022, but my grandmother was born 100 years before Mary Knight in 1922 when those images were taken. And so I was thinking about all the things she eventually became throughout her life, right? And how many names we're given as women, how many different names I'm called, during the day, even, names by people who deeply love me, but, who think about my personhood in a different way. So I was just trying to illuminate a lot of that, how many different people we become with naming.
Yes, I can see that. And I was so enthralled. I mean, I'm just like mouthing these words that you had. And I know we're going to see some of Lisa's
Oh yeah,
images on the
we can go
screen.
through those, Faith. That
Yeah,
would be
and
awesome.
Lisa, why don't you talk to us about your process of naming and creating as we kind of look at your, it sounds like sometimes it can be a deeply spiritual experience, but I would like to hear from you what exactly that process is like.
May I tell you why I named this one generational wealth?
Yes.
My grandmother um, never really gave me any toy that I can remember. She died at the age of 98. But the
Mm,
love, the stories, the kindness that she
Mm,
gave me made me who I am today. And
mm,
so a lot of times we think about materialistic wealth, but
mm,
there's so much richness in other forms that can be given to us that
yeah.
can make such an impact on our lives. And that's why I call that generational wealth, because I know Remica received a lot from the
mm,
stories and the history of both of her grandmothers
Yeah.
that
mm.
really cannot be purchased or bought.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that resonates through. So your process of naming, is there something in particular that you, and I know we're going to see some of your work just to kind of flash across the screen,
Yeah,
but is that,
we
what's
can go through
that
all of those
process like?
slides. Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, the long walk home. I just think about how when I think about my small town of Ken, Mississippi, and I grew up, church was the center of my life, and how a lot of people walked home. I mean, they
Mm,
would walk from church to wherever they lived, and they would have an umbrella to keep the sun and the heat off of them. And so that's why this one is called the long walk home.
mm,
Mhm.
The rapture. In the last days, the angels will come down and take everyone up to heaven. My father and the deacons used to clean the graveyard. And they
mm,
would joke about who they knew in the graveyard and how in the last days that, they would be taken up to heaven. And
mm,
so this is the rapture, going home.
mm.
Baptismal. I was baptized like this at the age of 9 in a pond. I remember seeing the cows on the other side of the bank. Probably I need to draw a picture with the cows in it, on the other side of the bank. And so this is called country baptismal, a very sacred ceremony, specifically in the Baptist religious tradition. Very sacred ceremony, baptismal.
Mm,
The cotton pickers. My grandmother, I picked cotton with her when I was a little girl. When I was a little girl, she would put me on a sack and pull me along with her. When I was old enough, she would give me my own sack and I would pick cotton with her. And so I think about the cotton pickers and the role that they played in my life and that the lessons that I learned from them, how proud they were to put in a hard day's work and how they did this, for survival. And this was their job. And they really worked hard on their job.
amazing.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you so much. It's so lovely to see your paintings. They are absolutely beautiful. And Remica, I want to talk about delving into family stories. You did a lot of work, a lot of research. I love reading the story of taking your family to the African American Museum in
Yeah.
DC. I did that. I visited, so I
Mm,
was envisioning and seeing myself in the same way. And then the research, and in your acknowledgement, you thank so many people for helping bring these stories to life.
yeah.
But let's talk about it on a personal level. I write about family a lot, and sometimes you get a little anxious, when you're writing these stories, because you
Yeah.
still have you have your ancestors, but you also have your family that are living, that are understanding these
Oh yeah.
stories through your eyes. So talk about I wouldn't say responsibility, but what the role of the poet is when you're rehashing, illuminating all these things. Talk to us about that process.
Yeah, I mean, that line that Lisa brought up, the poet has many jobs, there's other lines in there too, not just to raise the dead, but soothsayer, line dancer, like we got to do a lot of different things. And I really feel like my idea about the role as a poet, thank you guys. My idea about the role as a poet has changed over time.
Mhm.
And I think my family's understanding of my role as a poet has changed over time. I'll tell a little teeny story. In my first book, there was a poem called Fish Fry, but it was really called Why I Wasn't Invited to the Last Fish Fry. 'Cause people eventually people say, well, dang, Remica, you telling all the stories. Girl, don't say nothing around that child. You know she gonna write it down. Right. So, for a while they was kind of mad. By the third book, they would say, Remica, get in here and write this down because ain't nobody else got this story. We need to make
Yes,
sure that you're sitting right. So
yes,
that
yes.
for me
You
was a
become the
really interesting
historian.
shift. That's right.
Yes, yes.
They understand, oh, this is the person who is going to make sure that our stories are told in a way that's at least reasonable. I'm gonna tell the truth. So, if you don't want the truth in there, you better not mess up. But I'm gonna tell the truth. But also, for this book in particular, I really was thinking about like, man, now we're talking about a kind of wider scope of generations than I could imagine. I just want to show this really quick. There's another beautiful element in the book. It's a family tree that was
Mhm.
designed by two Black women who have a design company called Vibe by Design right here in Norfolk, Virginia. And this to me was almost more important than the poems, like making
Mhm.
sure that we had a record of our family history and thinking about folks even beyond. We were very fortunate. All of that time in the library and all of that research led to us, having folks all the way back to 1813. We were able to get past that barrier of enslavement,
Yes, that's a blessing
which
to
is
fill
so
in
much.
all of those. Yeah, you didn't have too many missing links there.
It really
Yeah,
is. It really is tremendous.
yes.
So, those kinds of things became my responsibility over time. If I was going to be the historian, then I better do some of that work in addition to writing some of the beauty.
Yeah, also Lisa talked about her cover art called, generational wealth. And I think
Mhm.
about that in terms of generational wealth, whereas your family initially shied away, but they're like, look, she's telling our stories and you're owning this story. I
Yeah.
just love that. I
Mhm.
love that. So how would one of the things I was asking a lot, that I was thinking a lot is reflecting, you had your great grandmother and then your grandmother, which you've had some of those experiences, with through her children and all of that. So tell us, in the poem, just what would be what's unsaid, what's left that
Ooh.
you would want to say in these poems?
Oh, I mean, really, there's so much because when you're dealing with generations, I mean, when you're dealing with a life, when you're dealing with a full life, women who live to 84 and you get 20 pages of poems, I mean, you have to pick and choose, what you leave out. Um, for me, what was really interesting and it's difficult to convey because there's so many layers, but my consultants, my family consultants on this book, were my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who's still very much alive, Shirley Bingham, the book is dedicated to. Minnie was her great grandmother, and she was born in Minnie's bed. She remembers Minnie personally. Minnie lived until she was 5, so she was telling me many of the family stories, and I would have loved to have more poems that led all the way up to her living. But I mean, that's another 2, 3 books for that. We had to narrow down. And the same thing with Mary Knight, who I was much closer to just because of time and age. I
Mhm.
was holding her hand when she passed away in 2007. So I was with her for much of her life. But there's still so many stories of her mother and grandmother who also suffered with some health issues that are just whispers. And I would have
Yes.
loved to have more information and kind of piece these things together, but you only have so much space and time. So I hope I've opened the floodgates and some of my other little cousins will pick it up behind me.
Yes. And you started with joy, so I'm going to kind of round up our last question before we go into the Q&A. You
Yeah.
talked about joy. You can see the joy. There's a balance in your work that I truly love. We're telling these heartbreaking stories, but there's also these moments of joy and humor in some
Yeah.
places. And then Lisa, in your work, there's joy. Talk to us about the importance of this balance. That is also part of this generational legacy, right, that we pass on. Talk to us about why it was important for you to tell all parts of these stories, particularly centering joy in some of the pieces.
Lisa, I want to hear from you on that first. Yeah. How do you center joy? Why is it important to center joy in your art? And then I'll round it out.
Because when I think about my community and my people, We lived in a time that was simple but yet complex.
Mm.
And within that environment, there was joy and there was happiness. Even in simplicity, there was joy. You know, church, for instance, people, it was not just the spiritual preaching. People would get together and talk about what they did during the week and share their joy and their happiness with each other. And so for me, it's important to let people know that in the midst of simplicity, that there's still joy and happiness. And that's very important for me. And plus, I was happy. I was happy being in my community. I was happy being with my grandmother, my parents. And that happiness is what I put on canvas, the joy that I felt as a child growing up within my immediate community. And it's really wonderful to show both, that there is happiness in simplicity.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It reminds me, Lisa reminds me, but also this is something I reside with a lot. You know, that Nikki Giovanni poem that we all go back to, Nica Rosa, where she talks
Yes.
about her childhood, right? And then
Yes.
she says, you know, man, all the while I was quite happy. Like y'all have missed the point. And I think that was something, I wrote a lot of this book during the pandemic, where it was a time where we were anxious and frightened often. And I was listening to other writers talk in Zooms, much like this one. And I was listening one day to Kiesi Lehman was doing a talk with Sarah Broom, who's written, you know, really beautiful family memoir. Both of them have written beautiful memoirs, but hers is called The Yellow House, and it kind of traces what was happening with her family in New Orleans. And so I wrote a poem that's really, the title comes from a line that they uttered. I'm trying to carve out a world where people are not the sum total of their disaster.
Oh, wow.
Right? And
Wow.
so that's one of the last poems in the book. And the last line in that poem is, their suffering wasn't everything. So for me, it was imperative for people to know these folks held us in joy. They
Yes.
taught us how to live in joy. They taught us how to endure sorrow. They taught us how to make a way out of no way. So all these things that you now hear people spout, this is why we exist, right? This is why we are living. It's miraculous and amazing. And I wanted to make sure that we shine the light on that too.
And thank you for doing it. And thank you for passing it on and passing it on outside of a personal space where now this lovely book, Room Swept Home, is in the world. We're able to follow the story of Minnie and of Mary and just understand through their lens. I just love how we're seeing their persons. So it's not just a story of, you know, tobacco and slavery or a woman dealing with postpartum. It is a story. These are these women's voices. And that's what I find so incredible about your writing. And it's personal. I'm not from the South. But to walk into, I know them. So I'm going to end the way we started. Dear editor, I want to find my people. And you did it, Remica. And Lisa, your art also helped just amplify that, you know, through the work. And I just want to thank you both for taking us on a journey and for really creating this beautiful work that while it is your people, Remica, is all of our people, you know, and, you know, this is just a lovely, lovely piece of art. Thank you both.
Thank you so much. Y'all don't invite Trapeta back because that is very rude to make me cry on my own event about my own book. No, we appreciate you so much.
You ought to be crying and cheering. It is a remarkable work. Thank you both.
My goodness, I think we all might have shed a little tear here listening to that. Thank you all for that beautiful and inspiring conversation. I mean, it's more than the work, right? We know this is deeper work that moves in a blood memory, ancestral way. This is work that connects us in ways with that family tree. Oh my God, I know everyone, in just for a moment, witnessing that, then is thinking and imagining about theirs. Do they know their family tree? How far does it go? Like, I mean, this work is documenting our existence, and not just the beautiful poetry and artwork that it contains. Thank you all so much. That was lovely. Before we get into questions, I do want to remind our incredible audience members that you too can own a copy of Room Swept Home if you do not already. please make sure that you do get a copy of that book from Torch's bookshop page. I believe Faith is going to share the slide with that QR code on it to make it easy for you to just snap a picture and go straight to the link. And amplifying Black women writers is to make sure that their work is out there and available for us to have for our own and to share with each other. So if you already have a copy, thank you so much for supporting Remica in this incredible book, but do get another copy. Share it with a friend, share it with a library, share it with someone you know will be moved by these incredible poems. Just take a snapshot of that QR code. You'll go straight to Torch's bookshop page. It's the very first book in a list of books by Torch Features. And then if you just send a copy of that receipt, email it to contact@torchliteraryarts.org with your physical mailing address, we will be more than happy to mail you a signed book plate by Remica to include in that book. What a special treat to add to your book to have her signature inside of it. We also have some incredible events coming up with Torch. If you don't already, please follow Torch Literary Arts online. You can visit torchliteraryarts.org, subscribe to our newsletter, scan that QR code right there on your screen so that you can visit torchliteraryarts.org and stay up to breast on all of the incredible events we have coming up. These is just a taste between now and March. We have the Writing Circle, which is virtual and free for Black and BIPOC women writers at intersecting identities to dedicate time to your writing and completing your works, whatever they may be. The Gathering with Samia Bashir and Marvin K. White will be taking place here in Austin, Texas at the George Washington Carver Museum. We have the Salon, which is an incredible monthly event at the historic Antone's nightclub in downtown Austin that benefits Torch, and it opens with an open mic and then a curated listening experience. We're making our way through the women of the Black arts movement. And then we have a workshop. This is also virtual, so make sure that you register for that if you're interested. It is Write, Publish, and Thrive with Kamari Carter Hawkins. Register by February 23rd. Again, that is virtual. And then we've got We Got Something, Black Women Writing from Inspiration to Creation with Monique Moses and Charla Lauriston. Those are both incredible screenwriters who are currently writing for HBO, Netflix, NBC. So that's going to take place here in Austin, Texas during South by Southwest, but you do not need a badge to attend. You'll get details on our website, and we'd love to see you there. So make sure that you're following Torch so you can come back to more events like this incredible conversation with Remica, Lisa, and Trapeta. Now we're going to go to the questions. It looks like we've got two questions in the Q&A. Or actually, one first is a statement. Thank all of you for your insight of the joy and journey of life. Thank you, Cornelia Banks, for that praise of these incredible women. And then Sarah Everett asked a question. Yellow and gold are strong colors in the cover art and in the poems. What do these shades of yellow mean or evoke in this painting for each of you?
Ooh, that has to be Sarah. Sarah is a wonderful reader and annotator, and only she would pick that out. Lisa, I'd love to hear, yellow is gold and yellow, one of my favorite papers. One of my favorite colors. The inside of the book lining is also gold. That was something that we were thinking about. But Lisa, tell me why it shows up in your work.
Yes, and when I think of your work, Remica, I think of deep emotion. And so as I was designing your cover, whenever I use orange, red, and yellows, they always symbolize deep feeling and deep emotion. And that's why I use this particular color on your book. And you put in the blue that symbolizes also a little peacefulness, but it was the deep emotion that I wanted to convey, the deep feeling and emotion. And whenever you see my paintings with orange, red, yellow, normally it's deep emotion.
I love to, for me, this image was always, we never discussed whether we thought it was sunrise or sundown, but for me, it was always, you don't get to rest until after the sun is going down. So for me, this is an image of people finally getting to be home, getting to be together, resting after a long day's work, because that was constant. And so that kind of beauty, the gold, and Frankie Beverly and Mays, I hope y'all know the golden time of day. You know, that's something that I really I think about a lot. So, one of the kind of soundscapes that sits with me and makes me, think about what we're doing on the cover here. Great question, Sarah.
It does. It's very peaceful color. Even the blues and all of the yellows, the orange, and blues working together. It's very peaceful. And I do think Remica also that restfulness and time of rest. Yeah,
That's right.
Wonderful.
I know I was not part of the conversation, but I also want to just add, I mean, what is the title of that cover piece again, Lisa?
Generational wealth.
All right, so of course it's golden.
Come
Of
on.
course it's wealth.
Come on.
It has to be.
And not part of the conversation, but it's blurb in the back of the book, Miss Texas Poet Laureate. I would just like to say thank you so much. My former laureate, my current laureate. Somebody call some state representative. I got to hang with these people. I love
my
y'all.
goodness. And we're going to close on one more praise from the audience. Crystal Delaney. Looks like there's one more question. I think we've got time to squeeze that in, but a little bit of praise. Great conversation, ladies. And I love hearing all of you working and supporting each other. Keep up the wonderful work. And then here is a question. What are the three of you working on now?
I'm working on naps. I'm trying to get some sleep anyway that I can, because this book just came out last week. I'm working on a novel. It'll be a long time before anybody sees it, but I'm working on a novel. It's a love story.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm also working on rest and trying to complete a manuscript. I'm very excited about that. You talked about the piece of mental illness, postpartum. So I'm working in my mother's voice on writing a series of poems on mental illness. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
And I am constantly trying to paint when I have time. And I just published a paper, or submitted a paper for publication on art, wellness, and culture. And so I'm hoping that will get published. And then I know Remica and I, we have some other little projects in the future that we're working on. Have to bring Trapeta on into this also.
Right. We're just going to keep trying to have fun together. We're going to keep these Black women circles moving, these art circles moving, and take care of each other. That's right.
We love
Amanda,
to see it.
thank you for this forum. I mean, what an amazing joy Torch Literary Arts is. And you said this is the inaugural webinar, right?
Yes, this is our first webinar. So what a way to get things started.
Yes, thank you for this. Thank you. So lovely.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you
So much. And as I said at the top too, this is made possible thanks to our incredible funders, but also individual donors like all of you. It doesn't matter if it's $5 or $50,000. We need every single bit of it to make this work happen. So we are putting that donation link in the chat there. You should all be able to see it. If you're able to donate something, we've got a special campaign happening right now. We're part of Austin's Amplify Austin campaign, which is celebrating 700 nonprofits in Central Texas. But you can give straight to Torch, and we've got some awesome prizes that are listed there, including, I'll just jump straight to the grand prize, a nice stay at the beautiful Colton House Hotel and 2 tickets to see Nicki Minaj at the Moody Center here in Austin.
What?
So,
I mean, these are big, y'all better donate.
They are big prizes, and we've got some more announcements coming soon. I mean, the generosity
girl at the go ahead.
I mean, you can get a flight to come down here for that. I mean, it's a really nice package. We've got some other fun things that are coming that we'll announce soon. But no matter what you donate, you'll be entered to win, and there's other ways to participate. So just click on that link and see the details. But you support us first and foremost by showing up and listening to this incredible story, buying the book, reading the work, and sharing it with your community. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Remica. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Trapeta. Thank you, Faith, Torch's incredible programs associate, for working behind the scenes and keeping us moving right along. And thank you all for joining us and attending our very first webinar for this In Conversation series. Look forward to seeing you next time. Y'all have a good evening.